Okay, let's dive into this. We've been looking through quite a bit of material pointing towards some potentially really interesting moves in the crypto world.
That's right. And specifically, a lot of focus on XRP.
Exactly, XRP. It always seems to generate buzz, doesn't it?
It really does. And the analysis we've seen tries to map out its future prospects. So our goal today is really to unpack that, pull out the core insights.
Yeah, especially why some experts seem to be expecting some, well, pretty substantial price jumps by the end of 2025.
Right. And the material we looked at puts the current price somewhere around $2.16.
$2.16, yeah. So when they talk about big moves, we're talking potentially multiplying that quite a bit.
Definitely.
So we want to get beyond just the target numbers and really understand the thinking the different expert takes behind them.
Precisely. It's the reasoning that matters, not just the headline figure.
So, okay, what kind of predictions are we seeing? I gather there's quite a range in the material.
Oh, absolutely. It's not uniform at all. One analyst, George Tung, he's quite well known. He's suggesting XRP could potentially land between, say, $8 and $10 by the end of 2025.
$8 to $10, okay.
But what's really interesting is he calls that a conservative estimate.
Conservative, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that sets a certain tone, doesn't it? Because the material we reviewed definitely includes some much higher forecasts too.
It does. Some other experts are looking for at least $6, which, from $2.16 is still a pretty significant jump.
Sure, that's nearly a 3x right there.
But then you've got others who are even more optimistic. eGreg Crypto, for instance, sees signs pointing towards maybe $13, possibly even $22.
13 or 22?
Yeah.
Getting up there.
And Dark Defender, another analyst focusing on technicals, chart patterns. They highlight formation suggesting $18.22 to $23.20 might even be reachable relatively soon, based on a new weekly chart pattern they're seeing.
Okay, $18 to $23. Those are serious numbers compared to today. And wasn't there one more, Da Vinci Jeremy? The material mentioned his view changed quite a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Apparently, he wasn't always so keen on XRP, but his latest take, based on what we read, suggests it could potentially reach $24.
$24. So we're seeing this spread from a conservative $8 up to potentially $24.
Exactly. And that range really reflects the different ways these analysts weigh things, different catalysts, different technical signals they prioritize. But the overall theme from the material is definitely bullish potential.
Okay, so let's dig into that why. What are the key reasons, the catalysts mentioned in these analyses that are making these experts feel so positive about XRP?
Well, the material points to several things. First, just the sort of inherent nature and history of XRP itself. It's survived multiple bear markets.
Right, it's not some flash in the pan. It's been around, seen a few cycles.
Exactly. And some perceive it as having pretty solid fundamentals underpinning it.
Okay, but the analysis seemed to put a lot of weight on institutional interests, like bigger players getting involved.
Yes, that's a really critical factor highlighted. The material suggests there's growing interest from larger financial firms, maybe hedge funds, asset managers, people who haven't traditionally been big in crypto.
And how would that interest actually, move the price?
Well, that connects directly to another major potential catalyst they talk about, XRP ETFs, exchange-traded funds.
Wow, right. Like the Bitcoin ETFs.
Precisely. An ETF basically wraps up XRP into a format that traditional finance understands and can easily trade on regular stock exchanges.
Making it accessible to folks who maybe can't or won't buy crypto directly.
Exactly right. And the material notes several XRP ETFs are potentially being developed. If, and it's still an if, they get approved, that could just open the floodgates to huge amounts of capital that aren't really in the XRT market right now.
Okay, so ETFs are a potential bridge for big money. Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about the technical side, chart analysis?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the picture for many of these analysts, like we mentioned with Dark Defender. Some predictions rely heavily on identifying chart patterns that historically suggest a big breakout is coming.
Like that new weekly pattern you mentioned.
Yes, that specific formation.
Yeah.
And there's another interesting technical point raised this idea of a mid-cycle pattern relative to Bitcoin.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It's about watching how XRP performs compared to Bitcoin. The analysis suggests that historically, if XRP takes a significant dip, maybe 20% or more, specifically against Bitcoin, not just in dollar terms, that can sometimes signal a classic point in the market cycle that often comes before a strong rally for XRP, almost like a coiled spring effect relative to the market leader.
Interesting. So a potential buying signal based on relative performance.
Potentially, yes. According to that specific analysis, it's presented as a tactical observation.
Got it. And what about actual usage? Does the material mention anything about adoption driving demand?
It does, yeah. Increased use by financial institutions is flagged as another potential driver, specifically systems like Ripple's on-demand liquidity or ODL.
Right. ODL uses XRP for cross-border payments, doesn't it?
Exactly. It uses XRP as a bridge currency to make international transfers faster and cheaper. So the thinking is, as more banks or payment providers use ODL,
They need to buy XRP to facilitate those transactions.
precisely, which creates real fundamental demand for the asset itself.
Okay, so it's really a mix of things then. XRP's own history and perceived strength. Big institutions potentially coming in, new investment products like ETFs making it easier for them, chart patterns looking positive, and maybe growing real-world use through ODL.
That's a good summary of the key drivers highlighted in the material, yes. It's that potential convergence of factors that seems to be fueling the optimism.
Okay. Now, how does this potential for XRP stack up against what the material says about, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum? Where does it fit in the bigger picture that paint?
The analysis does provide some context there. So for Bitcoin, the prediction is for solid growth, but maybe more measured, perhaps in the range of 1.5x to 2x from current levels during this cycle.
Okay, good, but not necessarily the explosive gain some might be hoping for percentage-wise.
Right. Ethereum is seen with potentially higher growth, maybe around 3x to 4x.
3 to 4 times. Better than Bitcoin's projected multiplier there.
But then XRP, according to this analysis, is seen with potential for maybe 4x to 5x growth in this cycle, especially if the overall market mood stays positive or improves.
Ah, okay. So potentially outperforming both Bitcoin and Ethereum
Yeah.
on a percentage basis from where it is now.
That's the potential scenario outlined, yeah.
Yeah.
And the analysis also threw out some very high peak numbers for Bitcoin, like $200K to $300K, kind of setting a potential ceiling for the whole market this cycle.
Right. Setting the context for the bull run.
And interestingly, one analyst mentioned SMQKE even suggested XRP might outperform Ethereum this year, which is quite a statement given Ethereum's dominance in DeFi and NFTs.
Yeah, that's a bold call. Okay, so that helps frame where XRP's potential trajectory fits within their view of the broader market.
It really shows the conviction some analysts have about XRP's specific setup right now, compared even to the other major crypto assets.
Now, with all this talk of potential big gains, we absolutely have to touch on risk and responsibility. Crypto is volatile, everyone knows that. Does the analysis address this?
Oh, yes, very much so. And it includes some important cautionary notes. There's a clear warning against, chasing those get-rich-quick dreams. Like thinking you can turn $1,000 into $100,000 overnight without understanding the massive risks.
Right. Those kinds of returns are incredibly rare and usually involve huge gambles.
Exactly. They even mention meme coins like Pepe as examples of where those initial massive gains happen, but chasing that now is extremely high risk and much less likely to work for newcomers.
So manage expectations, basically.
Absolutely. And the recommendation shared in the material aligns with that, suggesting maybe putting the bulk of any investment into more established projects, the ones with history and fundamentals.
Like the ones we've been discussing.
Right. And perhaps only allocating a small slice, they suggested maybe 5 or 10%, to those much riskier, high potential, but highly uncertain plays, if that suits your risk tolerance, of course.
That sounds like pretty standard diversification advice applied to crypto. Sensible.
It does. And tying back to that tactical analysis we mentioned earlier.
The relative performance against Bitcoin.
Yeah. Looking for that potential dip in XRP relative to Bitcoin, that 20% or more drop is presented not just as a pattern, but as a potentially more responsible entry point.
How so?
Well, instead of just buying blindly or chasing a pump FOMOing in, it's about trying to identify a point of potential value based on historical analysis. Being patient, strategic.
Okay, so waiting for specific technical setups or relative weakness could be part of a more measured approach.
That's the idea presented, yes. And they also mentioned keeping an eye on key price levels on the way up. Like $5.85 was specifically noted as a potential resistance or milestone level to watch.
So understanding the potential roadblocks, too.
Exactly. It's all part of navigating the volatility somewhat responsibly, even within a bullish outlook.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up based on the material we explored. The core message seems to be significant expert optimism about XRP's price potential by the end of 2025.
Yeah, forecasts vary a lot, but many point towards multi-dollar figures, significantly higher than today.
And this optimism seems rooted in a blend of factors. XRP's history, growing institutional buzz, the big potential impact of ETFs, positive signals from chart analysis, and maybe growing demand from real-world use like ODL.
That covers the main points highlighted in the analyses and predictions we reviewed, yeah. It's a snapshot of how some experts are viewing XRP's path forward right now.
It certainly gives us, and you listening, a lot to think about. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. If things like institutional adoption and ETFs really do become major forces for assets like XRP, as this material suggests, how might that change the whole game?
How could it reshape crypto's relationship with traditional finance? And maybe more importantly, what does that shift mean for how you think about the accessibility, the risks, and just the overall future of digital assets?